Welcome to our deep dive into the Personal MBA. It's jam-packed with business insights, and we're here to help you kind of unearth those golden nuggets without, you know, uh, getting bogged down in all the details.
We'll break down the core concepts so you can use them whether you're leading a company or just trying to navigate the world with a bit more savvy.
Right? And the crazy thing is, the author actually skipped business school, taught himself from hundreds of books, and still built this, like, wildly successful career.
It really does capture the spirit of the book, practical knowledge over just theory.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What would you say is a business according to this Personal MBA idea?
Well, the book lays out five main parts. Like it has to provide something people want at a price they are willing to pay, and it has to be delivered well.
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. What about the other two?
It needs to create profit for the owner, making sure it can actually sustain itself. And last but not least, it's got to satisfy customers so you build that loyalty and get people talking about it in a good way.
It's really interesting how just one missing piece can turn a business into just a hobby, or even, like the book says, a scam.
Oh, absolutely. And then the book brings up this thing called the iron law of the market.
Ooh, okay, I'm listening.
Basically, even with an amazing product and a killer team, you can still fail if you're in a bad market.
So it's all about, are there enough people out there who are actually going to buy what you're selling?
Exactly. That's it. The book is really big on doing market research before you put in all your time or money. It's about finding a market that has potential to really increase your odds of success.
That's like planning a big party and just hoping people show up.
That's the perfect way to put it. Understanding what your customers want is key. And to understand those customers, the book digs into human drives.
Okay, this is getting good. Tell me more about that.
The book looks at four main drives that basically control what we do: acquire, bond, learn, and defend.
Let's break those down, starting with acquire. What does that mean?
Well, acquire is all about wanting things like wealth status, even power. Think about companies that promise a life of luxury or a way to become influential.
Oh, like those ads with the fancy cars and private jets.
Exactly. Then there's bond, which is about our need to connect and feel like we belong.
So things like social media or dating apps.
You got it. They tap into our need for relationships and being part of a community.
What about the learn drive?
That one comes from us being curious and wanting to learn new things like online courses, educational books, anything that says it can help you grow your skills.
And finally, we've got defend.
Right. This one's all about feeling safe and secure. Companies like those selling home security systems or insurance really play into that.
It's amazing how businesses are built around these basic human desires.
It's true. And recognizing these drives in yourself and your potential customers can help you make better choices in business.
That makes a lot of sense. So we have these drives, but then the book talks about 12 forms of value.
Right. These are like the basic building blocks for anything a business offers, whether it's a product, a service, or a subscription.
Kind of like having a Lego set for business models.
Exactly. You can mix and match these forms to see what works best for your market.
Okay, now I'm curious, can you give me an example of a form of value that might surprise people?
One that often throws people off is shared resource. It's basically giving access to something valuable that lots of people can use.
Like a public library or maybe a gym.
Exactly. Think about co-working spaces or even streaming services. They all offer shared resources that meet different needs.
That's really interesting. What other forms of value do you think are important?
Another good one is subscription. This is giving ongoing access to something for a recurring fee.
Also, like those monthly subscription boxes or software services.
That's it. It provides a steady income for businesses and convenience for customers.
So we've got these building blocks of value, but how do we know if our idea is actually any good?
That's where shadow testing comes. And the book says don't get too attached to your idea without testing it out in the real world.
You mean test before you invest big?
Exactly. It's about selling your product or service before it's even finished to see if there's actual demand.
Sounds like a smart way to avoid wasting time and money.
The book uses Fitbit as a perfect example. They nailed shadow testing before they started mass producing.
That's pretty clever. So how would someone actually go about doing shadow testing?
Well, it could involve pre-selling your product, setting up a simple website to gauge interest, or running surveys to get feedback.
So basically getting real data before you go all in.
Exactly. It helps you spot any problems early on and saves you headaches later.
It's like dipping your toes in the pool before jumping in head first.
I like that analogy. And speaking of jumping in, the book also talks about how important attention is in business.
I can see why that would be crucial. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
No business can succeed without getting its audience's attention. The book goes deep into strategies for grabbing the right kind of attention at the right time.
Meaning not just any attention, but attention from people who could actually become customers.
Exactly. Understanding your target market's needs and tailoring your message accordingly is key.
So what are some of the main takeaways from the book on how to do that?
One important idea is levels of awareness. Your potential customers are all over the spectrum, from completely unaware of what you offer to buy, ready to buy right now.
So it's about figuring out where they are on that spectrum and guiding them towards becoming a customer.
You got it. So effective marketing is about meeting them where they are and encouraging them to take the next step.
Okay, that's fascinating. But once you have their attention, how do you actually turn them into paying customers?
That's where persuasion comes in, and the book has some pretty insightful things to say about that too.
I'm all ears. Tell me more.
It explores psychological principles like reciprocation damaging admission and framing.
Okay, let's unpack those one by one. What's reciprocation all about?
It plays on that natural instinct we have to return favors. If you offer something valuable upfront, like a free consultation, you're more likely to get something back in return.
Interesting. Kind of like giving a little something to get a little something.
Exactly. Next, we have damaging admission.
So does it mean like admitting your product is terrible?
Not quite. It's more about acknowledging a weakness right away to actually build trust and make yourself seem more credible.
So it's about being upfront instead of trying to hide flaws.
Exactly. It shows that you're authentic and honest, which are super important for building strong relationships with customers.
Okay, what about framing?
Framing is all about presenting your offer in a way that highlights its strengths and downplays any potential objections.
So it's like crafting a story that makes your product sound awesome.
It's not about being deceptive, it's about emphasizing the real value and presenting it in the best light possible.
Gotcha, that makes sense. But getting a customer is only the first step. How do you keep them happy and coming back for more?
That comes down to value delivery, and it's absolutely essential for long-term success.
I imagine it involves going above and beyond what's expected.
The book really stresses meeting or exceeding expectations, creating a sense of predictability, and making sure everything runs smoothly.
So is that kind of like under-promising and over-delivering?
You got it. Value delivery is everything from how you fulfill orders to customer service and even anticipating and addressing potential issues before they become problems.
That makes sense. Are there any specific ideas about value delivery that stand out from the book?
One is the expectation effect, which basically says you need to manage what your customers expect, set realistic expectations, and then go above and beyond. That's how you get happy customers.
Okay, so don't make promises you can't keep,
Right. Another big concept is predictability.
meaning always delivering what you promised.
You got it. Whether they're buying a product or a service, customers value consistency. Delivering on your promises builds trust and loyalty.
So it's all about eliminating those bad surprises.
Exactly. Those can really damage trust and hurt your reputation. Consistency is key for building solid customer relationships.
All right, let's shift gears and talk about the money side of things. The Personal MBA talks about this idea of sufficiency, right?
Yeah, it challenges that whole more is always better mentality and encourages business owners to figure out what success really means to them.
So finding that sweet spot where you're making enough money to keep your business going and live a good life.
Exactly. Sufficiency encourages us to think about our financial goals and make sure they line up with our overall aspirations.
Right, money is important, but it's not everything the book also talks about. Profit.
Yeah.
What's the key takeaway there?
The Personal MBA makes a clear distinction between cash and profit. Having cash on hand is crucial for daily operations, but profit shows if your business is viable in the long run.
So it's about making more than you spend, ensuring you can grow and handle any challenges that come up.
Exactly. And the book also touches upon the balance sheet.
Right. Can you explain why understanding the balance sheet is so important?
It's like a snapshot of your business's financial health at a specific moment. It shows what the business owns, what it owes, and what's left for the owner. It's essential for assessing financial stability and making smart choices about investments and your overall strategy.
Now, beyond just numbers, the Personal MBA also looks at the psychology of business, specifically this caveman syndrome thing.
Yeah, it acknowledges that even though our brains are really advanced, we're still wired for a world that doesn't exist anymore. We have these primal instincts that don't always serve us well in today's world.
So it's about recognizing those tendencies and learning how to manage them.
Exactly. And caveman syndrome can show up in all sorts of ways, from letting emotions affect our decisions to struggling with delayed gratification.
Can you give me an example of caveman syndrome from the book?
Sure, one example is how we tend to prioritize immediate rewards over long-term gains, even if those long-term gains are way better in the end.
The classic battle between wanting something now and thinking about the future.
Exactly. Our caveman brains are wired for immediate needs, which makes it tough to resist those temptations that could throw us off track from our long-term goals. It's like that instant gratification monkey on our shoulder, always whispering in our ear.
Right, right. Now, the book also talks about perceptual control, I think. Does that tie into this at all?
It does, and it really flips the script on how we usually think about our own behavior.
How so?
Well, perceptual control theory suggests that we aren't just reacting to things that happen to us. We're actually always trying to control how we perceive the world around us.
So we're not passive, but actively shaping our own experiences.
You got it. We're constantly adjusting what we do in order to make what we experience match our own internal kind of standards. It's all about finding balance.
Interesting way to look at it. What about these reference levels the book mentions? Are those related?
Oh, absolutely. Think of them like internal benchmarks we use to compare everything against. If how we're perceiving things doesn't line up with those reference levels, we take action to try and make them match.
So it's kind of like a thermostat, always adjusting to hit that set temperature.
Perfect analogy. And the cool thing is, by consciously choosing those reference levels, we can actually influence what we do and even help ourselves reach goals.
Okay, I can see how that would be powerful stuff. So let's move on to decision making. I know the book delves into mental simulation and inhibition. What's that all about?
All right. Well, mental simulation is basically our brain's superpower to imagine doing something before we actually do it, and then trying to predict what'll happen.
So we're running through scenarios in our heads to weigh the risks and the rewards.
Exactly. It helps us make smarter choices because we can think about the potential consequences beforehand.
Makes sense. And what about inhibition?
Inhibition is like our brain's braking system. It's the ability to stop ourselves from acting on impulse, to think before we leap, prevents us from doing dumb things just because we feel like it in the moment.
So it's all about that self-control and resisting those knee-jerk reactions that can sometimes get us into trouble.
You got it. Inhibition lets us take a breath, consider our options, really weigh the outcomes, and make choices we won't regret.
All right, so let's switch gears a bit and talk about the social side of business. I know the book dives into this whole idea of social status, right? How does that factor in?
Yeah, even in the business world, our place in the pecking order really matters. It's often a driving force, even if we don't realize it. And it definitely affects the choices we make.
So it's about recognizing that desire for status as a powerful motivator, both for ourselves and the people we're dealing with.
Absolutely. It can pop up in so many ways. Job titles, what we own, the recognition we crave, the whole nine yards.
And I remember the book brings up the status malfunction thing. What exactly is that?
It's kind of a warning against chasing after status symbols or positions that don't actually line up with what we value or might not even bring us real happiness.
So we need to be mindful of what we're pursuing,
Yeah.
make sure it actually matters to us,
Yeah.
not just chasing something because society tells us it's important.
Spot on. It's about being genuine and going after what truly matters to us, not just what we're told should matter.
Right, that makes sense. Now, I know the book also gets into these cognitive biases that can mess with our judgment. Can you walk me through some of those?
Sure. One biggie is loss aversion. Basically, we feel the pain of losing something way more intensely than the joy of gaining something of equal value.
So that explains why people are so afraid to take risks, even if they seem calculated.
Exactly. Loss aversion can make us cling to what we have, even if change might actually be good for us.
And then there's that planning fallacy the book talks about, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. It's our tendency to underestimate how much time and effort something's going to take. It leads to missed deadlines and budgets going out the window.
So that overly optimistic view that we can get way more done than we actually can.
Yep. We often focus on that perfect, ideal scenario and completely forget about potential setbacks or curveballs life throws at us.
Right, but the book doesn't just point out these biases. It also offers ways to try and overcome them, doesn't it?
It does. One good approach is to actively seek out different perspectives, people who think differently from us, to challenge our own assumptions.
So having people around who will call us out on our blind spots.
Precisely. Diversity of thought is so important when it comes to fighting those biases and making good, well-rounded decisions.
And the book also really emphasizes testing those assumptions out in the real world, right?
Oh, absolutely. Instead of just relying on our gut feeling or anecdotal evidence, we should be gathering real data, running experiments, and getting objective feedback to guide our choices.
So taking a more data-driven approach to ground those decisions in reality.
Exactly. Now, speaking of data, I know the Personal MBA also dedicates a whole section to analyzing systems. Can you break that down for me?
I'm all ears.
All right, well, it encourages us to see businesses and organizations as these complex systems with all these interconnected parts and feedback loops that affect everything.
So it's about understanding how all those pieces fit together and how even small changes can ripple outward and impact the whole thing.
Precisely. It's a much more holistic approach to problem solving because it takes into account all the different factors at play.
Makes sense. I also remember the book mentioning this garbage in, garbage out thing. How does that fit in?
Ah, that's all about the quality of the data we use. If we base our decisions on flawed or inaccurate information, well, our conclusions are going to be garbage too.
Right. So it really emphasizes the importance of using good data and being really critical of the information we're working with.
Exactly. Now, even though the book is big on data and systems, it doesn't forget about the human side of things either.
Of course. So how does it approach that working with others aspect of business?
It dives right into the dynamics of teamwork, communication, leadership, all those things that make or break how people work together.
Right. So even in this data-driven world, human relationships and collaboration are still essential.
Absolutely. It's about building strong connections, communicating clearly, and fostering a culture of trust and respect within teams.
The book also talks about this idea of comparative advantage, right? What's that all about?
It encourages us to play to our strengths and delegate tasks to others who can do them better or more efficiently.
So acknowledging that we can't be good at everything and that having people with different expertise benefits everyone.
Precisely. Comparative advantage is all about embracing teamwork and recognizing that a diverse skill set makes the whole team stronger.
Now, of course, teamwork isn't always sunshine and rainbows. There are definitely challenges that come up. I think the book mentions communication overhead. What does that refer to?
Oh, yeah, that's all the time and energy we spend just communicating and coordinating with each other, which can sometimes become a drain.
Right. So finding that balance between effective communication and avoiding those endless meetings or email chains that can suck the life out of us.
You got it. Successful teams streamline how they communicate, making sure information flows smoothly without unnecessary back and forth.
And the book also stresses the importance of creating a psychologically safe environment for people to work in, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That means creating a workplace where people feel comfortable speaking their minds, sharing ideas, taking risks, without being afraid of judgment or put downs.
So it's about building that sense of respect and value
Yeah.
where people feel empowered to actually contribute their best work.
Exactly. Psychological safety is crucial for creativity, innovation, and just open, honest communication.
Now, even with the best laid plans and a great team, sometimes things just go sideways. I think the book revisits that planning fallacy here, doesn't it?
It does. It's that reminder that we're naturally prone to underestimating how much time and resources things will take, which can really derail even the best planned projects.
So it's about acknowledging that inherent optimism and then taking steps to counter it.
For sure. Breaking down those big projects into smaller chunks, building in buffer time, and being realistic about our estimates can all help us avoid falling into that trap.
Good advice. The book also talks about the power of referrals in business, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, referrals are all about tapping into that trust that exists within our personal networks. People are much more open to recommendations from someone they already know and trust.
So it's like word of mouth marketing on steroids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about nurturing those relationships that can lead to valuable introductions and recommendations, which are often way more effective than any other form of marketing.
Makes sense. And then there's this whole idea of social proof that the book dives into, right?
Yep. Social proof plays on our tendency to look to others for cues on how to act, especially when we're in unfamiliar situations. We're much more likely to do something if we see other people doing it, especially if we see them as similar to us or in a position of authority.
It's like that herd mentality.
Exactly. And it's especially powerful when it comes to marketing. Showcasing those positive reviews, testimonials, seeing that other people trust and value what you're offering can really make a difference.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely fallen for that myself. And the book also explores this concept of authority, right?
It does. Authority is all about the influence people or institutions have just because of their expertise or their social standing. It can really sway how we think and what we do.
So it's about understanding how powerful authority figures can be and how they can influence our decisions, sometimes without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. It can be a very effective tool, but it's important to use it ethically and responsibly.
Right, for sure. So, circling back to those systems we were talking about before, I know the book talks about stocks and Slack. Can you remind me what those are all about?
Okay, so in systems thinking, a stock is any kind of resource that can be accumulated and used. Think inventory, money, even knowledge.
So, basically anything a system needs to function.
Exactly. And Slack is that extra buffer, that surplus of resources within a stock. It gives the system flexibility to handle fluctuations or unexpected challenges.
So it's like having that emergency fund for your business.
Exactly. Slack helps to make the system more stable and adaptable.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's this whole idea of constraints,
hmm
right?
Right. Constraints are those bottlenecks in a system that limit how much it can produce or achieve. They're the weakest links holding everything back.
So identifying and addressing those bottlenecks is crucial for getting the most out of the system.
Exactly. By focusing on those constraints, we can really boost efficiency and output.
And then there's the concept of feedback loops, which I always find fascinating. Can you remind me how that works?
Sure, feedback loops are all about how actions within a system trigger reactions, and then those reactions feed back into the system, either amplifying or dampening the original actions. It's a constant cycle of cause and effect.
So it's like that domino effect that can either keep things stable or send the whole system spiraling.
You got it. Understanding how those feedback loops work is key to understanding how systems maintain equilibrium and adapt to change.
Makes sense. And then the book introduces this concept called autocatalysis. What's that all about?
Autocatalysis is basically a self-reinforcing cycle where the output of a system also becomes an input, leading to exponential growth or decline.
So it's like that snowball effect, where things keep building upon themselves, getting bigger and bigger.
Precisely. Autocatalysis can either be a powerful engine for growth or a recipe for disaster, depending on what's being amplified.
Right, so it's a double-edged sword. Now, I know the book also acknowledges that uncertainty is just a part of life, especially in business. How does it approach that?
Well, it emphasizes that uncertainty is just inherent in the business landscape and that we need to develop strategies to deal with it. It's not about trying to eliminate uncertainty, but about being prepared to adapt.
So accepting the unpredictable nature of things and building that flexibility into our plans.
Exactly. Uncertainty shouldn't be something we fear, but something we acknowledge and navigate strategically.
Good advice. The book also delves into these interdependencies that exist within systems, doesn't it?
It does. Interdependencies are all about how different parts of a system are connected and how changes in one area can cascade and affect other areas, sometimes in unexpected ways.
So it's recognizing that our decisions can have unintended consequences elsewhere in the system.
Exactly. Understanding those interdependencies is crucial for making informed choices and being aware of the potential ripple effects.
And then there's this concept of second-order effects that the book introduces. What are those?
Second-order effects are those unintended consequences that ripple outward beyond the immediate impact of our actions. It's like thinking about the domino effect of our choices.
So it's not just about what happens right away, but about considering those long-term consequences that might not be immediately obvious.
Exactly. Second-order effects highlight the importance of careful planning and trying to anticipate those downstream impacts.
And I remember the book also discussing normal accidents, which is kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, normal accidents are those failures that can happen in complex systems, even when you have all the safety measures in place. It's because there are so many interconnected parts that even small errors can interact in unexpected ways and lead to something major.
So it's acknowledging that even the best designed systems aren't foolproof.
Exactly. Normal accidents emphasize the need for redundancy, really robust safety protocols, and learning from those mistakes when they inevitably happen.
Okay, so moving on to the more practical side of things, I know the book really emphasizes this idea of systems analysis. Why is that so important?
Well, analyzing a system means really breaking it down, looking at all the individual parts, and figuring out how they work together as a whole. It helps us understand what's going on under the hood, so to speak.
So it's like getting that X-ray vision to see how things are actually operating, which can then help us make improvements and troubleshoot problems more effectively.
Exactly. Analyzing systems gives us that deeper level of understanding that we need to really optimize performance and address issues at their root.
Makes sense. And I think the book talks about these key performance indicators, or KPIs. What are those all about?
Right. Key performance indicators, or KPIs, are those specific metrics we use to track how well a system is performing. They're the vital signs that give us insight into the system's overall health.
So they're like the dashboard gauges for our business, telling us what's working and what needs attention.
Exactly. Choosing the right KPIs helps us focus on what truly matters and gives us a clear, concise way to measure progress and identify areas for improvement.
And I remember the book emphasizing this idea of analytical honesty when it comes to looking at systems.
Yes. Analytical honesty is all about using accurate and reliable data when we're examining systems. It's about being honest with ourselves about what the numbers are really telling us, not just cherry-picking data to support our preconceived notions.
So making sure the information we're using is solid so that our conclusions are valid.
Exactly. It reinforces the importance of data integrity and critical thinking when it comes to analyzing systems.
Now, I know the book also acknowledges that things don't always go according to plan. There's always going to be some level of variance.
Right. Variance just means that there are going to be fluctuations and variations in how a system performs. The key is being able to distinguish between normal variations and those that signal a real problem.
So it's about having a baseline of what's considered normal and then investigating those outliers that fall outside of that range.
Exactly. Understanding variance helps us separate the signal from the noise so we can focus our efforts on what truly matters.
Now, I remember the book talks about using norms to help with this, right?
Right. Norms are basically historical data points that we use as benchmarks for comparison. We can look at how the system is performing now compared to how it's performed in the past to identify trends and potential red flags.
So it's about having that context for evaluating current performance.
Exactly. Norms give us that historical perspective that helps us make sense of what we're seeing now.
Now, I know sometimes it's just not possible to directly measure what we're interested in. I think the book introduces this concept of proxies to address that, right?
It does. Proxies are basically substitute measurements that we use when it's impractical or impossible to measure the thing we actually care about.
So we're finding a measurement that's closely related and using that as a stand-in.
Exactly. Proxies allow us to get information even when direct measurement is off the table.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, I know the book also talks about ways to actually improve systems, and one concept it mentions is refactoring. What's that all about?
Refactoring is all about making a system better without changing what it actually does. It's about streamlining the design, making it more robust, more efficient, all without altering its fundamental purpose.
So it's like giving the system a tune-up under the hood to make sure it's running smoothly.
Exactly. Refactoring is about making those incremental improvements that add up to better performance over time.
And then there's this idea of the critical few, which I find really helpful. Can you remind me what that's about?
Sure, the critical few, also known as the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, is the idea that a small number of factors usually drive the majority of the results. It's about focusing on those high-impact areas to get the biggest bang for your buck.
So prioritizing those tasks and activities that are really going to move the needle.
Exactly. The critical few helps us avoid spreading ourselves too thin and focus our energy where it matters most.
And then there's this concept of progressive load that the book introduces. What's that all about?
Progressive load is the idea that we should gradually increase a system's capacity over time rather than trying to do too much too soon. It's like training for a marathon. You wouldn't try to run 26 miles on your first day.
Right. It's about avoiding those sudden, overwhelming changes and giving the system time to adapt and strengthen along the way.
Exactly. Progressive load helps to ensure sustainable growth and reduce the risk of the system buckling under pressure.
And then the book talks about friction as something to be aware of within systems. What's that referring to?
Friction is basically anything that creates resistance or slows down a system. It's those obstacles and inefficiencies that get in the way of smooth operation.
So it's about identifying those points of friction and finding ways to eliminate them.
Exactly. Reducing friction makes the system more efficient and improves overall performance.
And I know the book also talks about automation as a way to improve systems. What are the key things to keep in mind with that?
Automation is all about using technology to take over tasks that were previously done manually. It's a powerful tool for streamlining processes and freeing up human brain power for more strategic work.
So it's about leveraging technology to do the heavy lifting for us.
Precisely. Automation can significantly boost productivity, but it's important to implement it thoughtfully.
Right, because I remember the book mentioning this paradox of automation. Can you explain that?
The paradox of automation is the idea that as we automate more and more tasks, the need for skilled human oversight actually becomes even more important. It's not about eliminating humans from the equation, but about changing the nature of their involvement.
So it's about recognizing that automation doesn't mean we can just set it and forget it. We still need skilled humans to manage and adapt those systems.
Exactly. Effective automation requires human intelligence to guide it.
And then the book talks about creating standard operating procedures, or SOPs, right?
Right. Standard operating procedures are basically those documented guidelines that outline how to perform tasks consistently and effectively. It's about creating a playbook so that everyone is on the same page.
So it's about establishing those best practices to ensure predictable and efficient outcomes.
Exactly. SOPs bring clarity, consistency, and accountability to how things get done.
Now, even with all this talk about systems and efficiency, I know the book doesn't lose sight of the human element. One concept that emphasizes is resilience, right?
Absolutely. Resilience is all about a system's ability to withstand shocks, adapt to change, and bounce back from setbacks. It's about building that capacity to handle whatever life throws at you.
So it's about designing systems that can roll with the punches and come out stronger on the other side.
Precisely. Resilience is crucial for navigating the unpredictable nature of business and life in general.
And one way to build that resilience is through stress testing, right?
Right. Stress testing is like putting your system through boot camp. You're intentionally pushing it to its limits to see where the weaknesses are and how it holds up under pressure.
So it's about proactively looking for those vulnerabilities so you can strengthen them before they become real problems.
Exactly. Stress testing helps us prepare for the unexpected and build more robust systems overall.
And then the book also delves into this idea of scenario planning, which sounds like a good way to prepare for those potential surprises.
It is. Scenario planning is all about exploring a range of potential future scenarios, both good and bad, and then developing plans for how to respond to each one.
So it's about anticipating those different possibilities and having a game plan ready to go no matter what happens.
Exactly. Scenario planning helps us develop that strategic foresight and flexibility we need to adapt to whatever comes our way.
All right, so as we start to wrap up our exploration of the personal MBA, I remember the book introducing this intriguing idea called the multi-armed bandit problem. Can you remind me what that's all about?
The multi-armed bandit problem is this classic dilemma of how to balance exploring new opportunities with exploiting the ones that are already working.
So it's that tension between sticking with what you know and venturing into the unknown.
Exactly. The multi-armed bandit problem highlights the need to find that sweet spot, to strike the right balance between exploration and exploitation to maximize our long-term gains.
And I think the book also touches on the different phases a business goes through over its life cycle, right?
It does. It outlines those key stages: exploration, expansion, maintenance, and consolidation. Each stage has its own unique challenges and opportunities that require different approaches.
So it's recognizing that businesses, like people, evolve over time, and what works in one phase might not work in another.
Precisely. Understanding those different phases of the business life cycle helps us make more informed decisions and navigate those transitions more effectively.
And finally, I know the book really champions this experimental mindset. Can you remind me what that means and why it's so important?
Sure. An experimental mindset is all about continuous learning, testing assumptions, and iterating based on feedback. It's about being curious, trying new things, and constantly seeking ways to improve.
So it's embracing that growth mindset and seeing challenges as opportunities for learning.
Exactly. An experimental mindset is crucial for success in today's fast-paced, ever-changing world, whether in business or any other area of life.
Man, we covered a lot of ground there. I feel like we barely scratched the surface of all the stuff in the personal MBA.
It is packed with information so much that it's easy to get lost in it. That's what makes a deep dive like this so helpful.
One thing that stood out to me is how the book really pushes for practical application. It's not just theory. It's about actually using these ideas in the real world.
Oh, totally. And it does that by giving you a framework for thinking about business. You know, whether you're starting your own thing, climbing the corporate ladder, or just making better decisions in your everyday life, these principles can apply.
I was also impressed by how the book connects ideas that you wouldn't think go together, like psychology systems, thinking, and even financial smarts. It brings them all together in a way that makes sense.
It shows how interwoven all those elements are in the business world.
So as we wrap things up, I'd love to leave our listeners with something specific. to think about something that'll stick with them after this deep dive?
I think the most powerful takeaway is the idea of having an experimental mindset.
You mean that whole idea of constantly testing, learning, and adapting?
Exactly. That mindset is crucial for success in the ever-changing world of business.
It's about not being afraid of uncertainty and seeing challenges as chances to learn and grow.
Exactly. Now, for our listener who's ready to put this knowledge to work, let's boil down the personal MBA into 10 key takeaways.
I love it that let's break down all this wisdom into points we can actually use.
Great, let's do it.
All right, takeaway number one. A business that thrives, creates real value, grabs the attention of its audience, and always delivers on its promises.
Without those fundamentals, any venture is going to have a tough time.
Takeaway number two. The iron law of the market is king. Even the best idea won't work if there's not enough demand.
Market research and making sure your idea is viable is super important.
Takeaway number three, understanding the four core drives that make us tick. Acquire, bond, learn, and defend gives us real insight into what motivates customers.
You need to create offerings that tap into those drives if you want people to care.
Takeaway number four, the 12 forms of value are like tools you can use to build and refine products or services that people will love.
They're the building blocks for creating something truly compelling.
Takeaway number five, testing your assumptions early and often using methods like shadow testing and taking small steps is key to avoid big, expensive mistakes.
Don't let your passion for an idea stop you from checking if it'll actually work.
Takeaway number six, grabbing attention in today's world is vital. Understanding where your audience is at and using smart persuasion techniques can really make you stand out.
Storytelling, social proof, and framing the right way can have a big impact on how people see things and what they do.
Takeaway number seven, delivering value isn't just about making the sale. It's about what comes after meeting or exceeding expectations. Creating consistency and ensuring things run smoothly are how you build long-term success.
Happy customers are what keep a business going.
Takeaway number eight, understanding the financial side of things like sufficiency, profit, and the balance sheet is how you make smart decisions.
Don't mix up cash and profit. Build a business that can last and aligns with what you believe in.
Takeaway number nine, working well with others means creating a positive work environment, using everyone's strengths, and not getting bogged down in endless communication.
It's about building trust, respect, and open communication in your teams.
And last but not least, takeaway number 10, have that experimental mindset. See problems as chances to grow and always be looking for ways to improve.
Being curious, trying new things, and constantly learning are essential for succeeding in the ever-changing world of business.
Those 10 takeaways from the Personal MBA offer a powerful set of guidelines for anyone navigating the sometimes crazy world of business.
They're like a roadmap to help you find success in your own way.
Well, I think we did a pretty good job breaking down the main ideas of the Personal MBA for our listener, giving them some solid tools to work with.
Remember, this is just the start. The real learning comes when you take these ideas and actually apply them to your own ventures.
Absolutely. We encourage you to dig deeper into the book, use the resources it offers, and most importantly, put what you've learned into action.
Embrace that mindset of constant growth and experimentation, and you'll find that navigating the world of business becomes a whole lot easier.
That wraps up our deep dive into the Personal MBA. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep thriving.